I never thought my husband would call me a bad mother in front of a judge. But there he was, standing in that cold courtroom wearing his best suit and most convincing smile, pointing at me like I was some kind of criminal while our 8-year-old son sat between us, confused and heartbroken. "Your Honor," Marcus said with that smooth voice that once made me fall in love. "She's emotionally unstable. She can't provide the structure our son needs." The words hit me like ice water, but what happened next changed everything. Because sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths, and my son was about to prove that in ways I never imagined. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Let me take you back to where this nightmare really began, because understanding how we got to that courtroom will help you see why what my son did was so extraordinary. It wasn't just one fight or one betrayal that brought us there. It was 18 months of carefully orchestrated manipulation, designed to make me question my own sanity and worthiness as a mother. Marcus and I had been married for 12 years when everything started falling apart. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in suburban Denver with our son Tyler, who was 7 at the time. Marcus worked as a regional sales manager for a pharmaceutical company, traveling frequently while I managed our home and worked part-time as a graphic designer for local businesses. From the outside, we looked like the perfect middle-class family. Sunday barbecues, family game nights, vacation photos that made our friends jealous. But Marcus had been changing, slowly and subtly in ways that took me too long to recognize. It started with small criticisms disguised as helpful suggestions. "Maybe you should pack Tyler's lunch differently," he'd say, examining the sandwich and apple I'd carefully prepared. "The other kids probably have better snacks." Or when Tyler came home with a scraped knee from playground adventures, Marcus would shake his head and sigh. "If you were watching him properly, this wouldn't happen." At first, I thought he was just being protective, maybe stressed from work. The pharmaceutical industry was competitive, and his territory was demanding. He'd come home exhausted, sometimes irritable, and I made excuses for his mood swings. I told myself every marriage had rough patches, that new parents often disagreed on the best ways to raise their children. Tyler was a bright, curious child, with endless energy and an imagination that could transform our living room into a spaceship or medieval castle within minutes. He loved building elaborate structures with his blocks, creating stories about brave knights and friendly dragons, and asking questions about everything from why the sky was blue to how airplanes stayed in the air. His teachers adored him, describing him as creative, kind, and eager to learn. But Marcus began finding fault with Tyler's personality, too. "He's too soft," Marcus would mutter when Tyler cried after accidentally breaking one of his favorite toys. "Boys his age shouldn't be so emotional." When Tyler wanted to take art classes instead of joining the soccer team, Marcus rolled his eyes and complained that I was making him weak by encouraging his creative interests. The criticism escalated gradually. Marcus started questioning every parenting decision I made, from bedtime routines to weekend activities. If Tyler had trouble falling asleep, it was because I was too lenient with his schedule. If he got excited and loud during playtime, I was failing to teach him proper behavior. When Tyler struggled with math homework, Marcus would lecture me about not providing adequate educational support. What made it worse was how Marcus presented himself to others. At school events, neighborhood gatherings, and family functions, he was the charming, engaged father everyone admired. He'd ruffle Tyler's hair affectionately, brag about his son's latest artwork, and speak with such apparent devotion about family life that other parents would compliment me on having such a wonderful husband. "You're so lucky," my neighbor Sarah would say after Marcus helped organize the annual block party. "He's so involved and caring." I'd smile and nod, feeling confused and guilty because my experience at home felt so different from what everyone else saw. The gaslighting became more sophisticated over time. Marcus would contradict things he'd said just days earlier, leaving me questioning my own memory. He'd promised to attend Tyler's school performances, then claim he'd never agreed to go and suggest that my unrealistic expectations were causing family stress. When I'd try to discuss his behavior, he'd turn it around, suggesting that my oversensitivity and inability to handle constructive feedback were the real problems in our marriage. Marcus also began undermining my relationship with Tyler in subtle ways. He'd make comments like, "Your mom worries too much, buddy. That's why you're always anxious." Or, "If mom had let you play outside more, you'd be better at sports." These remarks were delivered with a casual tone that made them sound like observations rather than deliberate attempts to erode Tyler's trust in me. The isolation crept in slowly. Marcus would find reasons why we couldn't attend social gatherings where I might have connected with other parents. He'd schedule last-minute work trips during weekends when I'd planned activities with friends. When my sister called to check in, he'd hover nearby, making comments afterward about how my family always stirred up drama and suggesting that their influence was negative for Tyler's development. My confidence as a mother began eroding under the constant criticism. I started second-guessing decisions I'd once made instinctively, researching parenting techniques obsessively, and seeking validation from books and websites because I could no longer trust my own judgment. The spontaneous, joyful moments Tyler and I used to share became less frequent, as I worried constantly about doing something wrong. Tyler began showing signs of stress, too. He became more clingy, asking repeatedly if he was being good enough, and apologizing for minor mistakes that didn't warrant such concern. His teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, mentioned during a parent conference that Tyler seemed anxious lately, often asking if his artwork was perfect and becoming upset when projects didn't meet his own impossible standards. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in March. Tyler had been working on a science project about the solar system, and we'd spent weeks crafting a detailed model with papier-mâché planets and hand-painted details. He was so proud of his work, chattering excitedly about presenting it to his class the next day. When Marcus came home and saw the project displayed on our dining table, his face darkened. "This looks like elementary school work," he said dismissively. "The other kids will have professional-looking displays. You've set him up to be embarrassed." Tyler's face fell, and I watched my confident, creative child shrink before my eyes. That night, Tyler came to my room in tears, asking if his project was stupid and if the other kids would laugh at him. "Your project is amazing," I told him, holding him close. "You worked so hard, and it shows how much you learned. That's what matters." But the damage was done. Marcus had successfully planted seeds of doubt in our son's mind about both his abilities and my guidance. That's when I realized I couldn't protect Tyler from this environment anymore. The man I'd married had become someone who found more satisfaction in tearing down his family than building us up. I began researching divorce attorneys, documenting incidents, and preparing for what I knew would be a difficult battle ahead. Marcus must have sensed the shift because his behavior became more controlling and aggressive. He started making unilateral decisions about Tyler's schedule, signing him up for activities without consulting me, and then criticizing me for not being supportive enough when I questioned these choices. He began working from home more frequently, claiming it was to monitor the situation and ensure Tyler was receiving proper care. The final straw came when I discovered Marcus had been secretly recording our conversations and taking photos of our home, collecting what he called evidence of my inadequate parenting. When I confronted him about this violation of our privacy, he calmly explained that he was simply protecting Tyler's interests and gathering documentation for future legal proceedings. "You're not stable enough to raise him alone, Marcus E., said matter-of-factly. "Any court will see that." The coldness in his voice chilled me, but it also strengthened my resolve. I realized this wasn't about our marriage anymore. This was about protecting Tyler from a father who saw him as a possession to be won rather than a child to be loved. I filed for divorce the following week, requesting primary custody of Tyler. Marcus's response was swift and vicious. Within days, he'd hired an expensive attorney and began a campaign to portray me as an unfit mother. He documented every minor household mishap, questioned every parenting choice, and began building a narrative that would eventually lead us to that devastating moment in court where he'd publicly declare me a bad mother. But what Marcus didn't count on was Tyler's remarkable capacity for truth and his growing understanding of what was really happening in our family. Children see more than adults realize, and Tyler had been watching, listening, and forming his own conclusions about the man who was supposed to protect and nurture him. The custody battle that followed would test every ounce of strength I had, challenge everything I thought I knew about justice and fairness, and ultimately reveal that sometimes the most powerful advocate you can have is a child who refuses to let lies stand in the way of truth. The custody battle began like a chess game where I didn't know the rules, but Marcus had been studying the moves for months. His attorney, Rebecca Stern, was a sharp-dressed woman with silver hair and a reputation for dismantling mothers in family court. She specialized in what she called parental fitness cases, which was a polite way of saying she made her living, convincing judges that loving mothers were actually dangerous to their own children. My attorney, David Chen, was younger and less expensive, working out of a small office above a coffee shop downtown. He was kind and thorough, but I could see the concern in his eyes when he reviewed Marcus's initial filing. They're alleging emotional instability, inconsistent discipline, and failure to provide adequate structure, David explained during our first meeting. These are serious accusations that we'll need to address systematically. Marcus had been busy during those final months of our marriage, and I was beginning to understand just how calculated his behavior had been. He documented everything with the precision of a prosecutor building a case. Photos of Tyler's messy room became evidence of my inability to maintain proper household standards. A grocery list I'd hastily scrawled became proof of my disorganization. Even Tyler's creative artwork, which I'd always celebrated and displayed proudly, was being presented as evidence that I lacked the structure and discipline necessary for proper child development. The psychological evaluation was scheduled for early April, and Marcus insisted on a specific psychologist, Dr. Patricia Hawthorne, who had a reputation for being thorough but also somewhat traditional in her views on family dynamics. The evaluation would involve multiple sessions with both parents, observations of our interactions with Tyler, and comprehensive testing designed to assess our fitness as caregivers. During my first session with Dr. Hawthorne, I tried to present myself as calm and composed, but I could feel the weight of Marcus's accusations hanging over every question. When she asked about Tyler's emotional development, I found myself over-explaining, desperate to prove that my son's sensitivity and creativity were strengths, not weaknesses. When she inquired about discipline strategies, I worried that my approach of natural consequences and empathetic communication would be seen as too permissive compared to Marcus's preference for strict rules and immediate punishment. Tyler's sessions with Dr. Hawthorne were perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of the entire process. My confident, imaginative child became quiet and cautious, carefully weighing his words like he was walking through a minefield. When I asked him how the meetings went, he'd shrug and say they were okay, but I noticed he'd started having nightmares again and had begun reverting to behaviors he'd outgrown years earlier, like asking me to check his closet for monsters before bedtime. Meanwhile, Marcus was putting on the performance of his lifetime. He attended every school event, volunteered for classroom activities, and made sure to be seen as the engaged, responsible father. He'd arrive at Tyler's soccer practice with expensive equipment and energy drinks for the team, positioning himself as the fun parent, while subtly undermining my efforts to maintain healthy boundaries around nutrition and screen time. The most insidious part of Marcus's strategy was how he began involving Tyler in the conflict without making it obvious. He'd ask leading questions like, "Do you feel safe when you're just with Mom?" or make casual observations like, "It's too, bad mom gets so worried about everything. It must be stressful for you." These comments were designed to plant seeds of doubt in Tyler's mind about my capabilities while making Marcus appear to be the more stable, reliable parent. Marcus also began what I later learned was called parental alienation, though it was so subtle that even I didn't recognize it at first. He'd promise Tyler special outings and then cancel them, explaining that mom's schedule conflicts made it impossible, even when I'd never been consulted about the plans. He'd buy Tyler gifts and then suggest that I was jealous of their relationship when I tried to maintain consistent rules about toys and treats. The financial pressure was enormous. Marcus controlled most of our assets and had immediately frozen our joint accounts, claiming it was to preserve marital property during the proceedings. I was forced to move into a smaller apartment with Tyler, which Marcus's attorney immediately cited as evidence of my inability to provide stable housing. The cramped two-bedroom unit felt like a palace to me because it was finally free from Marcus's constant criticism, but I knew how it would look to a judge who was evaluating our living situations. Working became nearly impossible with the demands of the custody case. I was constantly meeting with attorneys, attending court hearings, participating in evaluations, and trying to document my own evidence of Marcus's manipulative behavior. My freelance design work suffered, which created a vicious cycle where my reduced income became another weapon Marcus could use against me in court. Tyler's school became another battlefield. Marcus would show up unexpectedly for lunch dates or to help with classroom projects, making sure the teachers and other parents saw his involvement. He'd volunteer for field trips and school events, especially ones where I couldn't attend due to work obligations. When Tyler's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, mentioned during a conference that Tyler seemed anxious lately, Marcus immediately suggested that the stress was coming from instability at home, and hinted that my emotional state might be affecting our son's well-being. The breaking point in this psychological warfare came during Tyler's 8th birthday party in May. I'd planned a small celebration at a local park with a few of his closest friends, keeping it simple but special with his favorite superhero theme. Marcus arrived with an expensive remote control helicopter and announced that he had a surprise backup party planned at his new apartment, complete with a professional entertainer and elaborate decorations. Tyler was torn between loyalty to the party I'd organized and excitement about the helicopter and entertainer. Marcus played it perfectly, suggesting that Tyler could visit both parties and let him choose which one he enjoyed more. The underlying message was clear. Dad could provide exciting, expensive experiences while Mom offered modest, homemade celebrations. Several parents witnessed this display, and I could see them wondering why we couldn't coordinate better as co-parents, not understanding that Marcus had deliberately created this conflict to make me appear difficult and uncompromising. That evening, Tyler came home confused and upset. "Why can't you and Dad just be nice to each other?" he asked, and I realized that Marcus's strategy was working. My 8-year-old son was beginning to see me as part of the problem rather than recognizing his father's manipulation. It was becoming clear that Marcus wasn't just trying to win custody. He was systematically destroying Tyler's faith in me as his mother. The custody evaluation report arrived in June, and while it didn't recommend removing Tyler from my care entirely, it suggested that increased paternal involvement might provide beneficial structure and stability. Dr. Hawthorne had noticed Tyler's anxiety, but attributed it to the divorce process rather than recognizing the specific impact of Marcus's behavior. Her recommendations included family therapy and a graduated increase in Marcus's custodial time, exactly what his attorney had been requesting. As we prepared for the final custody hearing, I felt like I was drowning in legal documents, psychological reports, and character assassination. Marcus had successfully painted a picture of himself as the stable, successful father fighting to protect his son from an emotional, disorganized mother who was too permissive and inconsistent to provide proper guidance. But something interesting was happening with Tyler during this time. While Marcus's manipulation was designed to turn him against me, it was also revealing truths about his father's character that Tyler was beginning to understand, even at 8 years old. Tyler started asking more pointed questions about why Dad said things that didn't match what was actually happening. He noticed when Marcus made promises he didn't keep and began commenting on the difference between his father's public behavior and private actions. Tyler also began displaying a remarkable strength and wisdom that surprised everyone around him. His teacher noted that despite his anxiety about the family situation, he was showing increased empathy toward classmates who were struggling and had become a peacemaker during playground conflicts. Mrs. Rodriguez mentioned that Tyler had started writing stories about characters who stood up for truth and justice, themes that seemed unusually mature for his age. One evening in late June, Tyler came to me with a serious expression and asked, "Mom, do you think kids should tell the truth even when it might hurt someone's feelings?" It was such a loaded question given our circumstances, and I could see that he was wrestling with something important. "The truth is always important," I told him carefully. "Sometimes it's hard to tell the truth, and sometimes it might make people upset, but honest communication is the foundation of all healthy relationships." I had no idea that Tyler was preparing himself for what would become the most important conversation of his young life. The final custody hearing was scheduled for July 15th, and as that date approached, I felt a mixture of dread and determination. Marcus had built a compelling case on paper, but I knew the truth about our family dynamic, and I had to believe that somehow that truth would emerge. What I didn't expect was that Tyler himself would become the most powerful witness to that truth, or that an 8-year-old boy would find the courage to speak words that would change everything. During those final weeks before court, Tyler seemed to be watching and listening with unusual intensity. He'd grown quiet during Marcus's visits, observing his father with the careful attention of someone who was trying to solve a puzzle. I noticed him paying close attention to conversations between adults, especially when they thought he wasn't listening. It was as if Tyler was preparing for something, though I had no idea what that might be. Looking back, I realized that Tyler was developing his own understanding of justice and truth during those difficult months. While Marcus was busy manipulating situations and controlling narratives, Tyler was learning to recognize the difference between what people said and what they actually did. That education would serve him well when he found himself in a position to speak truth to power in ways that no adult had been able to accomplish. The night before the final custody hearing, Tyler couldn't sleep. I found him sitting by his bedroom, window at 2 a.m, staring out at the streetlights with an expression far too serious for an 8-year-old. When I asked what was wrong, he turned to me with eyes that seemed to carry the weight of months of confusion and pain. "Mom," he said quietly, "tomorrow when we go to see the judge, will he ask me questions?" I sat down beside him, choosing my words carefully. I'd been dreading this possibility, knowing that putting Tyler in the middle of our custody battle could traumatize him further, but also recognizing that his voice might be the only thing that could cut through Marcus's carefully constructed lies. "He might, sweetheart, but you only have to tell the truth about how you feel. No one can make you say anything that isn't true." Tyler nodded slowly, then reached under his pillow and pulled out a small notebook I'd never seen before. The cover was decorated with his own drawings of superheroes, and when he opened it, I saw pages filled with his careful 8-year-old handwriting. "I've been writing things down," he said, showing me entries dated over the past several weeks. "The things Dad says when he thinks I'm not listening, the things that don't make sense. I wanted to remember them exactly." My heart broke and swelled simultaneously as I realized my son had been conducting his own investigation, documenting the truth with the methodical precision of someone who understood that facts mattered. The courthouse was an imposing granite building downtown with high ceilings and marble floors that made every footstep echo. Tyler held my hand tightly as we walked through the metal detectors, his little notebook tucked securely in my purse. Marcus was already there with his attorney, looking confident and well-rested in an expensive navy suit. He nodded curtly at Tyler but didn't approach us, maintaining the careful distance his lawyer had probably advised. Judge Catherine Morrison was a woman in her 50s with kind but sharp eyes, who had a reputation for being thorough and fair. She'd reviewed all the documentation, psychological evaluations, and witness statements over the past week. As we took our seats, I noticed Tyler studying the judge with the same careful attention he'd been giving to adults lately, as if he was trying to determine whether she was someone who could be trusted with the truth. Marcus's attorney went first, presenting their case with polished precision. Rebecca Stern painted a picture of a devoted father fighting to save his son from an unstable mother, who lacked the structure and emotional stability necessary for primary custody. She presented photos of Tyler's messy room, examples of my inconsistent discipline, and testimony from witnesses who described Marcus as an engaged, responsible parent. Your Honor, Stern concluded, Mr. Harrison has consistently demonstrated superior judgment, financial stability, and emotional regulation. The child would benefit significantly from increased time in his father's structured, supportive environment. As she spoke, I watched Tyler's face grow increasingly tense, his small hands clenched in his lap. When it was David Chen's turn, he did his best to counter Marcus's narrative, presenting evidence of my involvement in Tyler's education, my consistent presence at school events, and testimony from teachers about Tyler's strong bond with me. But I could feel that we were fighting an uphill battle against Marcus's superior resources and carefully orchestrated campaign. Then Judge Morrison addressed the courtroom with words that changed everything. I'd like to hear from Tyler himself. Given his age and the nature of this case, I think it's important to understand his perspective. My stomach dropped as I realized my 8-year-old was about to face the most important conversation of his young life. Tyler stood up slowly, clutching his notebook. Judge Morrison gestured for him to approach the bench, and I watched my son walk across that courtroom with a courage that took my breath away. She leaned forward slightly, her voice gentle but clear. Tyler, do you understand that you're in a courtroom where we talk about very important things? Yes, ma'am, Tyler replied, his voice small but steady. My mom told me that courts are where people come to find out what's true and what's fair. Judge Morrison smiled slightly at this response, then continued, Is there anything you'd like to tell me about your family situation? Tyler looked back at me, then at his father, then opened his little notebook. I wrote some things down because I wanted to remember them exactly, he said. My dad tells people that my mom is a bad mother, but that's not true. She helps me with my homework every day. She makes me healthy food, and she reads to me every night. When I have bad dreams, she stays with me until I feel better. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but Tyler continued with increasing confidence. My dad says my mom is too emotional, but she only cries when I'm hurt or when he says mean things about her. I think crying when someone you love is hurting means you have a good heart, not a bad one. Judge Morrison leaned forward with increased interest. Can you tell me more about these mean things, Tyler? Tyler flipped to a specific page in his notebook. On June 23rd, my dad told Mrs. Patterson at my school that my mom couldn't handle basic parenting responsibilities. But that same morning, she had helped me finish my science project and made my favorite breakfast and drove me to school even though she was sick with a cold. The courtroom fell silent as Tyler continued reading from his careful documentation. On July 2nd, my dad told his friend on the phone that I was acting out because of my mother's instability. But I wasn't acting out. I was sad because he had promised to take me to the baseball game and then canceled to go to dinner with his girlfriend instead. Marcus's face was growing red, and his attorney was frantically taking notes, but Tyler wasn't finished. On July 8th, my dad told me that my mom didn't want him to see me very much because she was jealous of our relationship. But my mom always tells me that having two parents who love me is a good thing. and she's never said anything bad about my dad. Even when he says bad things about her. Judge Morrison's expression had shifted from patient interest to serious concern. Tyler, these are very specific details. Are you certain about these dates and conversations? Tyler nodded solemnly. I started writing them down because they didn't match what I was seeing with my own eyes. My teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, taught us about being good witnesses, and she said good witnesses pay attention to facts, not just feelings. He paused, then added with heartbreaking maturity, I love my dad, but I think he's been telling stories that aren't true to try to win something, and that's not fair to my mom or to me. The transformation in the courtroom was palpable. Marcus's confident demeanor had crumbled, replaced by the trapped expression of someone whose carefully constructed lies were being systematically dismantled by the very child he'd been using as a pawn. His attorney was whispering urgently in his ear, but the damage was already done. But Tyler wasn't finished. He turned to a page near the back of his notebook and said, Your Honor, there's one more thing I want to say. My dad called my mom a bad mother, but I know what good mothers do because I have one. Good mothers make you feel safe when you're scared. They celebrate the things that make you special instead of trying to change them. They tell you the truth even when it's hard, and they protect you from people who want to hurt your feelings. Tyler's voice grew stronger as he continued. My mom has done all of those things for me every single day, even when she was sad about the divorce, and even when my dad was saying mean things about her. She never said mean things back. She just kept taking care of me and loving me and making sure I knew that none of the grown-up problems were my fault. He closed his notebook and looked directly at Judge Morrison. I want to live with my mom because she makes me feel brave enough to tell the truth, just like I'm doing right now. She taught me that honesty is more important than winning, and I think that's the kind of person I want to learn how to be. The silence that followed Tyler's testimony was deafening. Judge Morrison studied the small boy standing before her bench with an expression of profound respect. Tyler, that was incredibly brave of you to share your observations with the court. You've provided very important information that will help me make the best decision for your future. As Tyler walked back to sit beside me, I saw something remarkable in his face. The anxiety and confusion that had plagued him for months had been replaced by a quiet confidence. He had spoken his truth in the most intimidating environment imaginable, and he had done it with grace, intelligence, and unwavering honesty. Marcus's attorney requested a brief recess to confer with her client, but when they returned, their strategy had completely collapsed. Rebecca Stern's polished confidence had evaporated, replaced by the desperate scrambling of someone trying to salvage an unwinnable case. She attempted to suggest that Tyler had been coached or influenced by me, but Judge Morrison shut down this line of argument immediately. Counselor, the judge said firmly, that child's testimony was far too detailed, consistent, and spontaneous to have been rehearsed. Moreover, his documentation shows a level of independent thinking and observation that speaks to his credibility as a witness. She turned to Marcus with a stern expression. Mr. Harrison, your son's testimony raises serious concerns about your conduct during these proceedings. When Judge Morrison delivered her ruling 30 minutes later, her words were clear and decisive. Based on the evidence presented, including the compelling testimony from the minor child, I am awarding primary physical and legal custody to the mother, Sarah Harrison. The father will be granted supervised visitation pending completion of a parenting education program and family therapy. But the judge wasn't finished. She addressed Marcus directly. Mr. Harrison, your son's detailed documentation of your statements and behavior suggests a pattern of manipulation and dishonesty that is harmful to this child's well-being. A child should never feel compelled to document his parents' lies in order to protect his other parent. Your son has shown remarkable courage and integrity today, qualities that will serve him well throughout his life. I strongly encourage you to reflect on the example you want to set for this exceptional young man. As we left the courthouse that day, Tyler walked with a confidence I hadn't seen in months. The weight of carrying family secrets and protecting truth had been lifted from his small shoulders, replaced by the empowerment that comes from standing up for what's right, even when it's terrifying. That evening, Tyler asked if he could keep his notebook. "I want to remember that telling the truth is powerful," he said. "Even when you're scared, even when you're little, the truth can change everything." I hugged him tightly, marveling at the wisdom and strength my 8-year-old had discovered within himself when it mattered most. The weeks following the court decision brought a peace to our home that I hadn't experienced in years. Tyler seemed to grow taller, not just physically but emotionally, carrying himself with a quiet confidence that radiated from knowing he had done something extraordinarily brave. The little notebook that had changed our lives now sat on his bookshelf, like a trophy, a reminder that even the smallest voices can speak the loudest truths. But our transformation was just beginning. Tyler's courage in that courtroom had awakened something powerful in both of us, a recognition that we were stronger than we'd ever imagined and that our story could inspire others who felt trapped in similar situations. What started as a legal victory evolved into something much more profound, a mission to help other families find their voices and reclaim their power. 3 months after the hearing, Tyler's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, approached me during a parent conference with an unexpected request. "Sarah, I've been teaching for 15 years, and I've never had a student quite like Tyler. The maturity and wisdom he's shown since the court proceedings is remarkable. Would you consider having Tyler speak to our school counselor's support group for children dealing with family changes? I think his story could help other kids who are struggling." Initially, I hesitated. Tyler had been through enough trauma, and I worried about putting him in situations where he might feel pressured to relive difficult experiences. But when I mentioned Mrs. Rodriguez's suggestion to Tyler, his eyes lit up with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen since before the divorce proceedings began. "Mom, remember what you always tell me about how our experiences can help other people?" he said earnestly. Maybe my story could help other kids know that they don't have to be scared to tell the truth. His eagerness to help others, despite everything he'd endured, reinforced my belief that we had raised a child with an extraordinary capacity for empathy and resilience. Tyler's first speaking opportunity was with a small group of 6 children, ages 7 to 11, who were all navigating various family transitions. I watched through the counselor's window as my son sat in a circle with these kids, his little notebook in his lap, sharing his experience with the same honesty and courage he'd shown in court. "I was really scared to talk to the judge," Tyler told the group. "But my mom taught me that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared." One little girl, whose parents were going through a bitter custody battle, raised her hand and asked, "But what if the grown-ups get mad at you for telling the truth?" Tyler's response amazed me. "Sometimes grown-ups get mad when kids tell the truth because it makes them face things they don't want to see about themselves. But that's not your fault, and it doesn't mean you should stop being honest. The truth is like a light that helps everyone see clearly, even when some people want to keep things dark." The school counselor, Dr. Patricia Weinstein, was so impressed with Tyler's natural ability to connect with struggling children that she suggested we consider expanding his reach. "Tyler has a gift for explaining complex emotional concepts in ways that children can understand and apply to their own situations," she told me. "Have you ever considered writing a children's book together about his experience?" The idea of turning our painful journey into something that could help other families sparked an excitement in both Tyler and me that surprised us with its intensity. We spent the next several months working together on what would become The Truth Notebook, A Boy's Guide to Being Brave, a children's book that presented Tyler's story in an age-appropriate way, while providing practical guidance for kids facing family challenges. Tyler insisted on illustrating the book himself, creating colorful drawings of superheroes who fought with honesty instead of weapons, courtrooms where children's voices were heard and respected, and families finding new ways to be happy even when they looked different than before. His artwork captured both the pain and hope of our journey in ways that resonated with children and adults alike. The process of writing the book together became a healing experience that deepened our bond and helped Tyler process his experiences in new ways. As we worked on each chapter, he would share insights and observations that continually amazed me with their depth and wisdom. "Mom," he said one evening as we reviewed a section about dealing with manipulative adults, "I think some grown-ups forget that kids are people too, with feelings and thoughts that matter just as much as theirs." Meanwhile, my own transformation was accelerating in ways I never could have anticipated. The strength I'd discovered during the custody battle, combined with the inspiration I drew from Tyler's courage, motivated me to make significant changes in my own life. I enrolled in a family advocacy program at the local community college, determined to help other parents navigate the complex legal and emotional challenges of custody disputes. My freelance design business also evolved as I began specializing in creating materials for family law attorneys and advocacy organizations. The combination of my personal experience and professional skills proved valuable to lawyers who needed someone who truly understood the emotional dynamics of family court proceedings. Within 6 months, I was earning more than I ever had during my marriage, proving to myself and Tyler that we could not only survive independently but thrive. The supervised visitation sessions with Marcus provided their own unexpected lessons in resilience and growth. Initially, these meetings were tense and awkward, with Marcus clearly resentful about the restrictions and Tyler cautious around his father. But gradually, something interesting began to happen. Without the ability to manipulate situations or control narratives, Marcus was forced to simply be present with Tyler in authentic ways. Tyler approached these visits with remarkable maturity, neither rejecting his father completely nor allowing himself to be drawn back into unhealthy dynamics. He set boundaries with the confidence of someone who had learned to trust his own perceptions and speak his truth. "Dad, I love you, but I don't like it when you say things about Mom that aren't true," he told Marcus during one visit. "Can we just play and have fun together instead?" The transformation in Marcus was slow and inconsistent, but Tyler's unwavering honesty seemed to create moments of genuine reflection. During one supervised visit, Marcus actually apologized to Tyler for some of his behavior during the custody battle. "I was so focused on winning that I forgot what was really important," he admitted. "You were braver than I was, son, and I'm proud of you for standing up for what was right." These moments of growth, however small and imperfect, taught Tyler valuable lessons about forgiveness, redemption, and the complexity of human nature. He learned that people could change and grow, even when that change came slowly and with setbacks along the way. Our book was published by a small press that specialized in children's mental health resources, and the response exceeded our wildest expectations. Libraries, schools, and family therapy practices began requesting copies, and we started receiving letters from children and parents who had found hope and guidance in Tyler's story. One letter that particularly moved us came from a 9-year-old girl in Oregon whose mother was fighting for custody against an abusive father. "Tyler's book helped me understand that my voice matters too," she wrote in careful cursive handwriting. "I told my counselor about the scary things my dad does, just like Tyler told the judge. Thank you for showing me how to be brave." These responses motivated Tyler to expand his advocacy work beyond the book. He began speaking at family court conferences, sharing his perspective with judges, attorneys, and child advocates who were working to improve the system for other children. His presentations were always age-appropriate and focused on hope and empowerment, rather than dwelling on trauma or victimization. Kids in family court need to know that their feelings and observations matter, Tyler would tell these professional audiences with remarkable poise. "We see things that grown-ups sometimes miss because we're paying attention in different ways. When adults listen to us with respect and take our voices seriously, it helps us feel safe and valued." Judge Morrison, who had presided over our case, attended one of Tyler's presentations and was so impressed that she invited him to speak at a statewide judicial training conference on children's rights in family court. Tyler's message to the judges was simple but powerful. When you listen to kids like we're real people with important things to say, you help us believe that truth and justice are real things, not just words. My own advocacy work expanded as, well, I began volunteering with a nonprofit organization that provided support services for families going through custody disputes, offering both practical assistance and emotional support based on my lived experience. The combination of my professional skills and personal journey made me effective at helping other parents document their cases, understand legal procedures, and maintain their emotional well-being during difficult proceedings. One of the most rewarding aspects of this work was mentoring other mothers who were facing similar challenges to what I had experienced. I developed workshops on recognizing manipulation tactics, gathering evidence effectively, and protecting children's emotional well-being during custody battles. These sessions provided practical guidance while also creating supportive communities where isolated parents could connect with others who understood their struggles. Tyler often joined me at these workshops, sharing his perspective with other children who were caught in family conflicts. His ability to connect with kids who were feeling scared, confused, or powerless was remarkable. He taught them practical strategies like keeping their own truth notebooks, asking trusted adults for help, and remembering that family problems were never their fault. Sometimes when grown-ups are fighting, kids think they have to choose sides or fix the problems, Tyler would tell these children. But that's not your job. Your job is to be a kid, tell the truth about how you feel, and let the safe adults in your life help you navigate the complicated stuff. As Tyler's 9th birthday approached, we decided to celebrate not just another year of his life, but the incredible growth and courage he had shown throughout our journey. Instead of a traditional party, Tyler requested a truth celebration, where we invited all the people who had supported us through our difficult times and had witnessed his transformation. Mrs. Rodriguez attended, along with Dr. Weinstein, David Chen, our attorney, several families we'd met through our advocacy work, and even Judge Morrison, who had maintained a supportive interest in Tyler's continued development. Each guest shared a story about how Tyler's courage had inspired them or impacted their work with other families. Tyler, Judge Morrison told him during the celebration, "You've taught me more about justice and truth in the past year than I learned in 20 years on the bench. You've shown that wisdom and courage aren't about age or size, but about character and integrity." Tyler beamed with pride, but what moved me most was his response. "Thank you, Judge Morrison, but I think I was just doing what my mom taught me, being honest and standing up for what's right." As I watched Tyler blow out his candles that day, surrounded by a community of people who celebrated not just his birthday, but his extraordinary spirit, I reflected on how far we had both come. We had transformed a painful, traumatic experience into a source of strength, purpose, and service to others. Tyler had learned that his voice mattered and that speaking truth could change lives, while I had discovered reserves of strength and resilience I never knew I possessed. The journey that began with Marcus calling me a bad mother in court had led us to a place where we were using our voices to empower other families facing similar challenges. Tyler's courage in that courtroom had saved our family, but his continued advocacy was now helping to save others. We had learned that healing happens not just in moving past trauma, but in transforming it into something meaningful that serves others. As we continue this journey together, Tyler and I are constantly amazed by the ripple effects of choosing courage over silence, truth over convenience, and service over self-pity. Our story continues to evolve, but its central message remains constant. Even in the darkest circumstances, especially when you feel smallest and most powerless, your voice has the power to change everything. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply tell the truth and trust that it will find its way to the people who need to hear it most. 2 years after that pivotal courtroom moment, Tyler and I found ourselves standing in front of the state capitol building, preparing for what would become the most significant expansion of our advocacy work yet. Tyler, now 10 years old, was about to address a legislative committee considering new protections for children's voices in family court proceedings. The irony wasn't lost on me that the same child who had once been dismissed as collateral damage in a custody dispute was now helping to shape policy that could protect thousands of other children. The invitation had come from Senator Maria Castellanos, who had heard Tyler speak at the judicial conference and was spearheading legislation to mandate specialized training for family court judges on child development and trauma-informed practices. Tyler's testimony was more compelling than any expert witness I've ever heard, she had told me during our initial meeting. His authentic voice cuts through all the legal jargon and gets to the heart of what these proceedings mean for the children involved. As we walked through the marble corridors of the Capitol, Tyler carried a new notebook, this one filled not with documentation of his father's lies, but with letters from children across the country who had found courage through his story. He had insisted on bringing these letters to read excerpts during his testimony, wanting to represent not just his own experience, but the voices of countless children who rarely get heard in adult institutions. "Mom, I'm nervous but excited," Tyler confided as we waited in the ornate committee room. "I keep thinking about that scared 8-year-old who just wanted someone to believe him. If what we're doing today helps other kids feel heard sooner, then everything we went through was worth it." His maturity continued to astound me, but more importantly, it demonstrated how children who are supported through trauma can transform their pain into purpose. The committee room filled with legislators, family law attorneys, child advocates, and media representatives. I watched Tyler survey the audience with the same careful observation skills he'd developed during our custody battle. But now those skills were being used to connect with people rather than protect himself from them. He had learned to read rooms not out of fear, but out of a desire to communicate effectively with diverse audiences. When Senator Castellanos called Tyler to the witness table, he walked forward with quiet confidence, his notebook of letters tucked under one arm and his original truth notebook in the other. The contrast between these two books told the entire story of our journey. From documenting injustice to inspiring change, from surviving trauma to creating healing opportunities for others. "Thank you for inviting me to speak today," Tyler began, his voice clear and strong in the formal chamber. 2 years ago, I was just a scared kid trying to help grown-ups understand what was really happening in my family. Today, I'm here representing thousands of children who need their voices to be heard and believed in family courts across our state. Tyler opened his letter collection and began reading carefully selected excerpts that illustrated the widespread nature of the problems he was addressing. This letter is from Emma, age 7, who wrote, "I tried to tell the court lady that my daddy scares me when he yells, but she said I was too little to understand." And this one is from Marcus, age 11. "The judge asked me questions, but I could tell he wasn't really listening to my answers." The impact on the committee was immediate and visible. Several legislators leaned forward, taking notes, while others exchanged concerned glances. Tyler continued with the poise of someone far beyond his years. "These children aren't asking for special treatment or trying to manipulate the system. They're asking for the same thing I asked for in my family's court case, to be heard, believed, and protected by the adults whose job it is to make decisions about their lives." Tyler then outlined specific recommendations that he and I had developed through our advocacy work, proposals that came directly from listening to children's experiences and understanding their needs. First, children should have trained advocates in every family court case, people whose only job is to make sure the child's voice is heard clearly. Second, judges should receive special training about how trauma affects children's behavior and communication. And third, courts should have child-friendly spaces where kids can speak honestly without feeling intimidated. But Tyler's most powerful moment came when he addressed the legislators directly about the broader implications of their work. When you make laws that protect children's voices, you're not just helping us in court. You're teaching us that our thoughts and feelings matter, that truth is important, and that there are adults who will fight to protect us. You're helping us grow up knowing that justice isn't just a word, but something real that people work hard to create. The committee's response was overwhelmingly positive, with several members thanking Tyler for his courage and insight. Committee Chair Representative James Murphy commented that Tyler's testimony had provided crucial perspective that would inform their deliberations. "You've reminded us that behind every family law case is a child whose future hangs in the balance," he told Tyler. "Your voice ensures that we never forget who we're really serving with these laws." Following Tyler's legislative testimony, media interest in our story intensified in ways that created new opportunities to reach struggling families. A national morning show invited us to share our experience, leading to appearances on family-focused podcasts and interviews with parenting magazines. Tyler approached each opportunity with the same authenticity that had made his courtroom testimony so powerful, always focusing on hope and empowerment rather than victimization or blame. During one particularly impactful television interview, the host asked Tyler what he would say to children who felt powerless in their family situations. His response became a viral social media moment that reached millions of viewers. "You might feel small right now, but your truth is big. Your feelings matter. Your observations are important. And there are adults who will listen and believe you if you find the courage to speak. Don't let anyone convince you that your voice doesn't matter just because you're young." The viral attention led to unexpected opportunities for expanding our advocacy work. Publishers approached us about creating additional resources for children and families, while organizations dedicated to children's rights invited Tyler to serve as a youth ambassador. Each opportunity was carefully evaluated to ensure it aligned with our mission and Tyler's well-being, as I remained vigilant about protecting his childhood while supporting his desire to help others. One of the most meaningful developments was the creation of the Tyler Harrison Foundation for Children's Voices, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting children's advocacy training and providing resources for families navigating custody disputes. Tyler insisted on being actively involved in the foundation's decision-making processes, reviewing grant applications, and helping to design programs that would genuinely serve children's needs. The Foundation's first major initiative was developing a curriculum for training child advocates, drawing from Tyler's experiences and insights to create more effective support systems for children in family court. Tyler participated in designing training materials that helped advocates understand how to communicate with children who had experienced trauma, how to document children's perspectives accurately, and how to present children's voices in ways that courts could hear and understand. Another significant foundation project involved creating support groups for children whose families were going through custody battles. Tyler personally helped design the program structure, insisting that these groups focus on empowerment and skill building rather than just providing sympathy. "Kids need to know they're not broken and they're not powerless," he explained to the foundation board. "They need tools and strategies and hope." The support groups became remarkably successful, with children reporting increased confidence, improved coping skills, and stronger self-advocacy abilities after participating. Tyler regularly visited these groups, sharing his story and answering questions from children who found hope in meeting someone who had successfully navigated similar challenges. One particularly touching moment occurred during a support group visit when a shy 7-year-old named Sophia asked Tyler if she was brave enough to tell a judge about her scary home situation. Tyler knelt down to her eye level and said gently, "Sophia, you were brave enough to tell me just now, and that means you have bravery inside you. We can help you practice getting that bravery ready for when you need to use it with the judge." This interaction inspired Tyler to develop what became known as courage coaching, a technique for helping children prepare emotionally and practically for court testimony. The approach combined age-appropriate explanations of legal processes with confidence-building exercises and truth-telling practice sessions. Children who received courage coaching showed significantly improved outcomes in their court experiences, speaking more clearly and confidently about their situations. Tyler's own relationship with his father continued evolving in complex but generally positive directions. The supervised visitation had gradually transitioned to unsupervised time, as Marcus completed parenting classes and demonstrated consistent behavioral changes. While their relationship would never be the idealized father-son bond that Tyler had once hoped for, it had developed into something honest and respectful. Marcus had been profoundly affected by witnessing Tyler's courage and the positive impact of his advocacy work. During one of their visits, Marcus told Tyler, "Son, I spent so much time trying to win a battle that I forgot the most important thing was helping you feel loved and secure. You've taught me more about integrity than I ever taught you, and I'm grateful for your patience with me as I try to become the father you deserve." This conversation marked a turning point in Tyler's healing process, as he learned that forgiveness didn't require forgetting or excusing harmful behavior, but could coexist with healthy boundaries and honest communication. Tyler's approach to rebuilding his relationship with his father became another teaching tool in his advocacy work, showing other children that complex family relationships could improve while still maintaining necessary protections. Our work together also strengthened Tyler's academic performance and social development in remarkable ways. His confidence in speaking truth and advocating for others translated into natural leadership abilities at school, where he became known for standing up to bullies, mediating conflicts between classmates, and helping newer students feel welcomed and included. Tyler's fifth-grade teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, noted that Tyler's advocacy experiences had given him exceptional empathy and communication skills. "Tyler has an unusual ability to understand different perspectives and help others find common ground," he observed. "He's become a natural peer mediator because he understands that most conflicts arise from miscommunication or unmet needs rather than malicious intent." This insight led to Tyler being selected for his school's peer mediation program, where he helped other students resolve disputes peacefully. His approach drew directly from his family court experiences, emphasizing the importance of letting each person share their truth, identifying underlying concerns, and finding solutions that respected everyone's legitimate needs. The success of Tyler's peer mediation work inspired the school district to invite him to help develop conflict resolution curricula for elementary schools. Tyler's contributions focused on teaching children how to express their feelings clearly, listen actively to others, and find creative solutions to interpersonal problems. His input helped create programs that were more engaging and effective than traditional adult-designed approaches. As Tyler approached his 11th birthday, we reflected together on the extraordinary journey that had brought us from that terrifying courtroom moment to our current work creating positive change for other families. Tyler had transformed from a frightened child trying to protect his mother into a confident advocate whose voice was influencing legislation, inspiring other children, and creating lasting institutional changes. "Mom," Tyler said one evening as we reviewed foundation grant applications together, "I used to think that what happened to our family was just a bad thing that we had to survive. But now I see that it was also a gift, because it taught us how to help other people who are going through scary situations." Maybe the most important thing about surviving something difficult is figuring out how to use what you learned to make things better for others. His wisdom reminded me that resilience isn't just about bouncing back from adversity, but about transforming that adversity into something meaningful that serves others. Tyler had learned to see his painful experience not as something that defined him as a victim, but as something that equipped him to be a healer and advocate for others facing similar challenges. Our story continues to evolve as Tyler grows and our advocacy work expands, but its central themes remain constant. The power of truth-telling, the importance of children's voices, the possibility of healing and growth even after trauma, and the responsibility to use our experiences to help others. We've learned that courage is contagious, that speaking truth creates ripple effects that extend far beyond our individual circumstances, and that even the most painful experiences can become sources of strength and purpose when approached with hope and determination. 3 years had passed since that transformative courtroom moment, and Tyler was now 11 years old, preparing for middle school with the kind of confidence and purpose that I could never have imagined during our darkest days. Our advocacy work had evolved far beyond what either of us had initially envisioned, creating ripple effects that were changing how family courts across the nation approached children's testimony and rights. The most significant development came when the Department of Health and Human Services reached out to Tyler, inviting him to join a national task force on child welfare reform. At 11, he would be the youngest advisor in the task force's history, bringing a perspective that professional experts, despite their good intentions, simply couldn't provide. The invitation came with a letter from the secretary herself, acknowledging that Tyler's unique combination of lived experience and articulate advocacy had already influenced policy discussions at the highest levels of government. "Tyler," I read from the official letter as we sat at our kitchen table, "your courage in speaking truth to power has demonstrated that children's voices are not just important, but essential to creating effective child welfare policies. We would be honored to have your insights inform our national strategy for protecting vulnerable children." Tyler listened intently, then surprised me with his thoughtful response. "Mom, this feels really big and important, but I want to make sure I can still help individual kids too. Sometimes when things get too official and governmental, people forget about the actual children who are scared and need help right now." His ability to maintain perspective on both macro-level policy work and individual human needs exemplified the wisdom he'd developed through our journey. We decided to accept the appointment with clear conditions. Tyler would participate in quarterly meetings and provide written input on proposed policies, but he would also maintain his direct service work with children and families. This balance allowed him to influence systemic change while staying connected to the grassroots reality of the problems he was working to solve. Tyler's first task force meeting in Washington, D.C. was both intimidating and exhilarating. The conference room was filled with PhD-level researchers, experienced social workers, veteran attorneys, and government officials who had dedicated their careers to child welfare issues. Tyler, carrying his ever-present notebook and a folder of recent letters from children seeking help, took his seat with the quiet confidence of someone who knew his perspective was both unique and valuable. The task force chair, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, introduced Tyler by explaining how his story had already influenced legislative changes in multiple states. Tyler brings something to our discussions that no amount of academic research can provide: the authentic voice of a child who has successfully navigated the very systems we're trying to improve. His insights have already proven invaluable in helping us understand the gap between policy intentions and real-world experiences. Tyler's first contribution to the task force discussions demonstrated his remarkable ability to synthesize complex issues into clear, actionable recommendations. When the group was debating new standards for child advocacy training, Tyler raised his hand and offered a perspective that shifted the entire conversation. "I think you're focusing too much on teaching advocates how to talk to kids, and not enough on teaching them how to really listen," Tyler said, consulting his notes. "When adults ask children questions in family court situations, they often already have an idea of what kind of answer they want to hear. Kids can sense that, and it makes us less likely to tell the whole truth because we think we're supposed to say what the grown-ups expect." He continued with specific suggestions. "Instead of just learning question techniques, advocates should practice sitting quietly and letting children tell their stories the way they want to tell them. And they should understand that sometimes kids need to say things in roundabout ways because direct questions feel too scary. I've learned that children will share truth when they feel safe, but safety comes from feeling truly heard, not just questioned." The impact of Tyler's contribution was immediate and substantial. Dr. Martinez later told me that Tyler's insights prompted the task force to completely restructure their proposed training protocols, shifting from interrogation-style techniques to what they began calling child-centered narrative approaches. This change would affect how thousands of child advocates across the country would be trained to work with vulnerable children. Tyler's influence extended beyond formal policy work through an unexpected opportunity that emerged from his growing reputation as a young advocate. A major streaming platform approached us about creating a documentary series focused on children who had overcome adversity to become advocates for others. The producers were committed to telling stories that inspired hope and empowerment rather than exploiting trauma for entertainment value. After careful consideration and extensive discussions with child psychologists and media experts, we agreed to participate in what became Young Voices, Big Changes, a 6-part series following Tyler and 5 other young advocates working on different social justice issues. Tyler's episodes focused on his evolution from frightened court witness to national child welfare advisor, but the series also highlighted other remarkable children working on issues like environmental protection, educational equity, and anti-bullying initiatives. The documentary provided Tyler with a platform to reach millions of families who might be struggling with custody battles, divorce trauma, or feeling powerless within legal systems. But more importantly, it showcased a new model of childhood resilience that emphasized agency, purpose, and service to others rather than just surviving difficult circumstances. One of the most powerful moments in Tyler's documentary episodes occurred when he returned to Judge Morrison's courtroom, now as an advocate rather than a frightened witness. Judge Morrison had invited Tyler to observe a custody hearing involving another child with the family's permission, to provide insights that might help ensure the child's voice was properly heard. 3 years ago, I sat in this same courtroom, feeling scared and small, Tyler reflected during the filming. Today, I'm here to help make sure another child doesn't have to feel as alone as I did. That transformation didn't happen because I was special or unusually brave. It happened because adults in my life chose to believe me, support me, and help me turn my pain into purpose. The child in the case Tyler observed was a 9-year-old girl named Mia, whose parents were engaged in a bitter custody dispute, complicated by allegations of emotional abuse. Tyler's presence in the courtroom, along with the child advocate training he had helped develop, created an environment where Mia felt safe enough to share her experiences clearly and completely. After the hearing, which resulted in protective measures for Mia and her mother, Judge Morrison reflected on how Tyler's advocacy work had transformed her approach to family court proceedings. Tyler didn't just change one case, she explained, to the documentary cameras. He changed how I understand the judicial system's responsibility to create space for children's voices. He taught me that protecting children requires more than just making decisions about them. It requires making decisions with them. The documentary's impact exceeded everyone's expectations, generating hundreds of thousands of messages from viewers who found hope and guidance in Tyler's story. Many were from children facing family challenges who felt inspired to speak up about their own situations. But equally significant were messages from adults expressing gratitude for being reminded that children's perspectives deserve respect and consideration in all aspects of their lives, not just legal proceedings. Tyler's response to this overwhelming attention demonstrated the emotional intelligence and genuine humility that had made his advocacy work so effective. Rather than becoming overwhelmed by fame or distracted by media opportunities, he used the increased visibility to create more direct service opportunities for struggling families. Working with our foundation, Tyler developed what became known as Truth Circles, weekly support groups where children dealing with family trauma could share their experiences in safe, facilitated environments. Unlike traditional therapy groups that focused primarily on processing emotions, Truth Circles emphasized empowerment, skill building, and peer support for developing self-advocacy abilities. Tyler personally facilitated many of these groups, creating curricula that combined storytelling, art therapy, and practical communication exercises. Children learned techniques for organizing their thoughts, expressing their feelings clearly, and building confidence in their own perceptions and experiences. Most importantly, they learned that their voices mattered and that speaking truth, even when difficult, was both powerful and healing. The success of truth circles led to expansion opportunities that Tyler approached with characteristic thoughtfulness. When a national children's charity offered to fund truth circles in every major city, Tyler insisted on maintaining quality control and authentic facilitation rather than simply scaling up quickly. It's better to have a few really good programs that actually help kids than a bunch of programs that just look impressive but don't create real change, he explained to the foundation board. Tyler's middle school transition provided new opportunities to test and refine his advocacy skills in everyday social situations. Rather than being intimidated by the typical challenges of 6th grade, Tyler approached middle school as a laboratory for practicing the leadership and communication skills he'd developed through his advocacy work. When Tyler encountered his first middle school bully, a 7th grader named Brandon who was targeting smaller students, Tyler's response exemplified how his experiences had shaped his approach to conflict. Instead of avoiding Brandon or simply reporting him to authorities, Tyler chose to engage directly using the truth-telling and empathy skills that had served him so well in more formal settings. "I noticed you seem really angry a lot," Tyler said to Brandon after witnessing him intimidate a 6th grade student. "I used to know someone who was angry like that, and it turned out he was actually really scared and didn't know how to ask for help. Is there something going on that's making you feel like you need to be mean to other kids?" Brandon's initial response was defensive and aggressive, but Tyler's genuine curiosity and non-judgmental approach gradually created space for a more honest conversation. Over several weeks, Tyler learned that Brandon's parents were going through a messy divorce, and his aggressive behavior was reflecting the chaos and powerlessness he felt at home. Tyler's patient engagement with Brandon led to a remarkable transformation. Working with school counselors, Tyler helped Brandon access support resources for dealing with his family situation. More significantly, Brandon became one of Tyler's most effective allies in creating a more inclusive school environment, using his social influence to protect rather than intimidate younger students. This experience reinforced Tyler's growing understanding that most problematic behavior stems from unmet needs or unexpressed pain rather than inherent maliciousness. His ability to see beyond surface behaviors to underlying human needs made him an extraordinarily effective peer mediator and informal counselor among his classmates. Tyler's academic performance also reflected the confidence and critical thinking skills he'd developed through his advocacy work. His teachers noted that Tyler approached assignments with unusual depth and insight, often connecting classroom learning to real-world social justice issues. His 7th grade civics teacher, Mrs. Patterson, described Tyler as the most naturally gifted critical thinker I've ever taught, with an intuitive understanding of how systems work and how they can be improved. When Tyler's civics class studied the Constitution and Bill of Rights, he wrote a research paper examining how constitutional principles applied to children's rights in family court proceedings. The paper was so sophisticated and compelling that Mrs. Patterson submitted it to a statewide student research competition where it won first place in the middle school division. Tyler's award-winning research included specific policy recommendations for strengthening children's constitutional protections in family law cases, drawing from both his personal experience and his extensive work with other children facing similar challenges. The recognition brought additional attention to Tyler's advocacy work and created new opportunities for him to influence policy discussions at state and national levels. As Tyler approached his 12th birthday, our family celebrated not just another year of his life, but the extraordinary impact he'd had on improving systems and outcomes for countless other children. The shy, frightened 8-year-old who had courageously spoken truth in an intimidating courtroom had evolved into a nationally recognized advocate whose insights were shaping policy and whose voice was inspiring hope in struggling families across the country. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Tyler's development was how he had maintained his essential childhood joy and curiosity despite the serious nature of his advocacy work. He still loved building elaborate structures with his blocks, creating fantastical stories about brave characters, and asking endless questions about how things worked. The difference was that now his play often incorporated themes of justice, truth-telling, and helping others, reflecting how his advocacy work had become integrated into his core identity rather than separate from his childhood. "Mom," Tyler said one evening as we reviewed foundation reports together, "I think the most important thing I've learned is that being hurt doesn't have to make you bitter or scared forever. It can make you stronger and more helpful to other people who are going through similar things. That's what I want kids to understand. Your pain can become your power if you choose to use it to help others." His wisdom reminded me that true healing involves not just recovery from trauma, but transformation of that trauma into something meaningful that serves others. Tyler had learned to see his difficult experiences not as burdens to carry, but as gifts that equipped him to understand and help other children facing similar challenges. Our journey continues to evolve as Tyler grows and our advocacy work expands into new areas, but its central message remains constant. Children's voices matter, truth has transformative power, and even the most painful experiences can become sources of strength and purpose when approached with hope, courage, and commitment to helping others. By Tyler's 12th birthday, our story had taken on a life of its own, reaching corners of the world we never could have imagined. The documentary series had been translated into 15 languages and was being used in social work training programs across Europe, Asia, and South America. Letters arrived weekly from children in countries as diverse as Japan, Brazil, and South Africa, all finding courage in Tyler's example to speak their own truths in challenging family situations. One letter that particularly moved Tyler came from a 10-year-old girl in rural Kenya named Amara, whose community had been struggling with how to handle custody disputes in ways that honored both traditional customs and children's well-being. Tyler's story helped our village elders understand that even young voices can carry ancient wisdom, she wrote through a translator. They have created a new council where children can speak about family problems, and now many families are healing, instead of breaking apart. Reading Amara's letter prompted Tyler to propose something that would become our most ambitious project yet, the Global Children's Truth Initiative, an international network designed to connect young advocates across cultural and economic boundaries. Tyler's vision was to create a platform where children facing family challenges anywhere in the world could access support, share strategies, and learn from each other's experiences. "Mom, I think courage is like a language that all children understand, no matter where they live or what language they speak," Tyler explained as we outlined the initiative. "If we can help kids connect with each other across the world, they'll realize they're not alone and they'll get stronger together." His insight reflected a sophisticated understanding of both child development and international cooperation that impressed the Foundation Board and potential funding partners. The Global Children's Truth Initiative launched with pilot programs in 12 countries, each adapted to local cultural contexts while maintaining core principles of child empowerment and truth-telling. Tyler worked with child development experts and cultural consultants to ensure that the initiative respected diverse family structures and traditions while still advocating for children's voices to be heard and valued. One of the most successful pilot programs developed in collaboration with schools in rural Ireland, where Tyler's story resonated deeply with communities that valued storytelling traditions but hadn't always recognized children as legitimate storytellers about their own experiences. Irish children began creating what they called truth poems that expressed their feelings about family situations in ways that honored their cultural heritage while advocating for their needs. Tyler was invited to visit the Irish pilot program during his summer break, and the experience profoundly impacted his understanding of how advocacy could take different forms while serving the same essential purposes. He spent 2 weeks working with Irish children and community leaders, learning traditional storytelling techniques while sharing contemporary advocacy strategies. I learned that every culture has ways of honoring truth and protecting children, Tyler reflected after returning from Ireland. Our job isn't to impose one way of doing advocacy, but to help each community find the methods that work best for them while making sure children's voices get heard. This insight shaped how the global initiative developed programs in other countries, always starting with understanding local customs and building from existing strengths rather than imposing external models. Tyler's international work also deepened his appreciation for the educational opportunities he had in the United States. When he learned that many of the children he was corresponding with had limited access to schooling, Tyler proposed using part of the foundation's resources to create educational scholarships for young advocates in developing countries. Working with international development organizations, Tyler helped design scholarship programs that supported children's education, while also training them as peer advocates in their communities. Recipients were selected not just for academic potential, but for demonstrated courage in speaking up for themselves or others, ensuring that educational opportunities went to children who would use them to benefit their entire communities. The first scholarship recipient was Amara from Kenya, whose village had embraced Tyler's advocacy model so enthusiastically. Tyler maintained regular correspondence with Amara as she pursued her education, learning as much from her perspectives on community-based child protection as she learned from his experiences with formal legal systems. Amara teaches me that advocacy isn't always about courts and laws, Tyler noted during one of our foundation meetings. Sometimes it's about helping communities remember that children are wise and deserve respect. She's changing her whole village by helping elders see children differently, and that's just as important as changing government policies. Tyler's middle school experience continued to provide opportunities for refining his leadership skills in everyday contexts. When his school faced budget cuts that would eliminate the art and music programs Tyler credited with helping him process his early trauma, he organized the most sophisticated student advocacy campaign in the district's history. Rather than simply protesting the cuts, Tyler researched alternative funding sources, analyzed the budget process, and presented the school board with a comprehensive proposal for maintaining arts education through community partnerships and grant funding. His presentation included testimony from students about how creative programs had supported their emotional development and academic success. Members of the school board, Tyler addressed them with the same confidence he'd shown in family court, and legislative committees. You have the power to choose whether our school nurtures the whole child or just focuses on test scores. Art and music don't just make school more fun. They give kids like me ways to understand and express feelings that are too big for regular words. Tyler's advocacy campaign succeeded in saving the arts programs and established him as a student leader whose voice carried significant weight with school administrators. More importantly, it demonstrated to his classmates that young people could effectively engage with institutional power structures when they combined passion with preparation and strategic thinking. The success of Tyler's school advocacy led to invitations to speak at education conferences about student voice in school governance. Tyler's presentations challenged educators to move beyond token student participation toward genuine power sharing that recognized students as stakeholders with valuable insights about their own educational experiences. Adults often ask students what we think about school policies, but they usually don't actually change anything based on what we say, Tyler observed during one conference presentation. Real student voice means students have actual influence over decisions that affect us, not just opportunities to share opinions that adults can ignore. Tyler's work in educational advocacy created unexpected connections with his ongoing family. Court reform efforts. He began recognizing parallels between how schools and courts often treated children as subjects rather than participants in decisions affecting their lives. This insight led to developing integrated approaches that addressed children's voice and agency across multiple institutional contexts. Working with researchers at the university level, Tyler contributed to studies examining how empowering children in one context transferred to increased self-advocacy in other situations. The research confirmed Tyler's intuitive understanding. The children who learned to speak effectively for themselves in school settings were better prepared to advocate for their needs in family situations, legal proceedings, and peer relationships. Tyler's 13th birthday marked 5 years since that pivotal courtroom testimony, and we decided to commemorate this anniversary by creating a comprehensive resource guide for families navigating custody disputes. From Fear to Voice, a Family's Guide to Truth-Telling in Family Court combined practical legal guidance with emotional support strategies and child empowerment techniques. The guide included Tyler's refined approach to courage coaching, step-by-step instructions for documenting family situations effectively, and scripts for age-appropriate conversations about legal proceedings. But its most innovative feature was a section Tyler insisted on including: guidance for non-custodial parents who wanted to rebuild relationships with children after damaging custody battles. I think some parents who behave badly during custody fights actually do love their kids, but don't know how to fix the damage they've caused, Tyler explained as we worked on this section. If we only help the good parents and ignore the ones who made mistakes, we're not really protecting children's long-term interests. Kids deserve chances to have healthy relationships with both parents when that's possible. Tyler's approach to parental rehabilitation reflected the sophisticated understanding of family dynamics and human nature he'd developed through years of advocacy work. The guide included specific strategies for rebuilding trust, making authentic apologies, and demonstrating consistent behavioral change over time. Perhaps most significantly, the guide emphasized children's agency in determining the pace and extent of relationship rebuilding, ensuring that reconciliation efforts centered children's needs and comfort levels, rather than parents' desires for forgiveness or family restoration. The resource guide became one of the most requested publications from our foundation, with family law attorneys, therapists, and social workers using it to support clients navigating complex custody situations. More importantly, families reported that the guide helped them focus on children's well-being rather than getting lost in adult conflicts and legal strategies. Tyler's relationship with his own father continued evolving in ways that exemplified the principles outlined in our resource guide. Marcus had completed multiple rounds of therapy and parenting education, demonstrating consistent behavioral changes over several years. Their relationship had developed into something authentic and respectful, built on honesty rather than manipulation. During one of their recent visits, Marcus had expressed genuine pride in Tyler's advocacy work, while also acknowledging the pain his earlier behavior had caused. "Tyler, I want you to know that watching you become such a strong advocate for other children has helped me understand how badly I failed you during our custody battle," Marcus said with obvious emotion. "You've become the kind of person I should have been supporting all along, and I'm grateful you've been patient with me as I've tried to learn how to be a better father." Tyler's response demonstrated the wisdom and emotional maturity that had made him such an effective advocate. "Dad, I think the most important thing is that you've changed, and that you keep trying to understand how your actions affect other people. I'm proud that our family figured out how to heal instead of staying broken forever." This conversation represented a profound healing milestone that Tyler incorporated into his advocacy work as an example of how families could recover from even serious damage when all parties committed to honesty, accountability, and growth. Tyler began including family restoration strategies in his presentations, emphasizing that healing was possible even after significant trauma when approached with patience and genuine commitment to change. Tyler's 8th grade year brought new, academic challenges that he approached with the same systematic thinking that had made his advocacy work so effective. When assigned a major research project on social justice issues, Tyler chose to examine the long-term outcomes for children who had participated in family court proceedings, comparing traditional approaches with newer models that emphasized children's voice and agency. His research involved surveying hundreds of young adults who had experienced custody battles as children, analyzing their educational outcomes, relationship patterns, and overall life satisfaction based on how their voices had been handled during legal proceedings. The results strongly supported Tyler's advocacy efforts, showing significantly better outcomes for children whose perspectives had been actively sought and respected during custody determinations. Tyler's research project was so sophisticated and compelling that his teacher encouraged him to submit it to national student research competitions. The project won multiple awards and was eventually published in a peer-reviewed journal focused on child development and family law, making Tyler one of the youngest authors ever published in that academic field. The recognition brought additional opportunities for Tyler to influence policy discussions and advocate for systematic changes in how family courts approached children's participation. His research provided empirical support for many of the reforms he had been advocating based on personal experience and intuitive understanding of children's needs. As Tyler prepared to transition to high school, he reflected on how dramatically his life had changed since that frightening day in Judge Morrison's courtroom. The scared 8-year-old who had courageously spoken truth to protect his mother had evolved into a nationally recognized advocate whose voice was influencing policy, inspiring other children, and creating lasting improvements in systems designed to protect vulnerable families. Mom, sometimes I think about that little boy with his truth notebook, so scared but determined to tell what was really happening, Tyler mused one evening as we reviewed foundation reports. I want him to know that his courage started something really important, that speaking up that day changed not just our lives but thousands of other lives too. I want every scared kid to know that their voice matters and that truth really can change everything. Tyler's reflection reminded me that advocacy work isn't just about achieving specific policy goals or helping individual families, though those outcomes are important. It's about creating cultural change that recognizes children as full human beings, whose perspectives deserve respect, and whose voices can contribute meaningfully to creating more just and compassionate communities. Our journey continues to evolve as Tyler grows into his teenage years, and our advocacy work expands into new areas and reaches new populations. But the core message remains constant. Children's voices have power. Truth-telling is transformative. And even the most painful experiences can become sources of strength and service when approached with courage, hope, and commitment to helping. Others find their own paths to healing and empowerment. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.